Hi everyone, and welcome to Lawyers with Game. If you're interested in legal issues in the world of esports and video gaming, you are in the right place. My name is Darius Gambino, and I am first and foremost a lifelong gamer. I have played on just about every home console from the original Atari to the Super Nintendo and now the PlayStation 5. I am also an intellectual property attorney with over 20 years of experience advising clients on issues related to patents, trademarks, and copyrights. I am with the firm of Saul, Ewing, Arnstein, and Lehr in Philadelphia, and you can find me on Twitter as @PhillyIP. With me today are Andrea Brockway and Amy Piccola. Amy and Andrea and I are all members of the Video Gaming and Esports group here at Saul Ewing. And maybe, Andrea, you can kick us off and say a little bit about your background.
Hi, Darius. Thanks. So happy to be here. My name is Andrea Brockway. I am counsel at Saul Ewing's Philadelphia office. As Darius mentioned, I'm in the Video Gaming and Esports group, and I'm also in the firm's Higher Education Practice group, as well as the NCAA compliance subgroup. We have a Nintendo Switch in my home, and fan favorites are Super Mario Odyssey, Minecraft, and Zelda Breath of Wild.
Hey Darius and Andrea, so excited to be here with you both. And hi everyone out there in the virtual world. I'm Amy Piccola, a partner in Saul Ewing's Philadelphia office. And like Andrea, I'm a higher education attorney. My primary focus is on student affairs, including student conduct and general institutional compliance with federal and state law. So I grew up playing graphic adventure games. King's Quest was my absolute favorite. And all of the open-ended city building and life sim games. I loved just about every sim world iteration, including Sim Ant, a big favorite as a middle schooler. I transitioned from PC gaming over to the PlayStation, and I am a big MLB The Show fan. Probably because of my life sim preferences, I love Road to the Show.
Thanks, Amy and Andrea. Yeah, as we've talked about in the past, I love MLB The Show as well. I'm more of Diamond Dynasty guy, but it's such a great game. So we hope that you like these videos. If you do, please like and subscribe to them. We are hoping to do a season 2 of this series in the near future. If you want to learn more about our law firm, you can visit the website www.saul.com. Keep in mind that this series is intended to be a high-level discussion of legal issues in the world of video games and esports. It is not intended as actual legal advice. If you need actual legal advice, please contact myself, Amy, or Andrea. Our email addresses will be in the description, and we are happy to help you out. Finally, we all enjoy a bit of gaming, as we just mentioned. If you want to challenge me on the PlayStation Network, I am Eagles Fan 71. And so today we are going to be talking about a really interesting issue, college esports programs. Amy and Andrea are experts in this area. And maybe, Andrea, you can kick us off and let us know what is the current state of college esports programs today?
Sure, Darius. There are hundreds of esports programs at colleges and universities across the country. Typically, an esports program will fall into one of 3 buckets: a varsity program, a club program, or a student-run rec program. The National Association of Collegiate Esports, otherwise known as NACE, reports that it has currently over 170 member schools and over 5,000 participating student varsity esport athletes. As you may or may not know, the NCAA does not govern collegiate esports. So 2 of the most well-known governing bodies are NACE, which I mentioned before, which is the largest governing body for varsity programs, and TESPA, which is the governing program for club programs. And while there are many differences across the bodies, one key difference for varsity esports between NACE and the NCAA is that NACE does not have the same amateurism requirements. So, for example, a collegiate esports athlete can profit off of his or her name, image, or likeness. Esports in campus touches many different departments. Some would be athletics and student affairs, for example, and there are a number of reported benefits for those campuses that have an esports program. Some reported benefits are diversifying your extracurricular activities, enhancing your recruiting and also your retention of students, and fostering interest in STEM, just to name a few.
Yeah, and I think what we're seeing mostly when a college is looking to set up a program is they're looking to either put it as part of academics as a varsity program, or they're looking to do it as a club program as part of student affairs. And you mentioned all of that. If I'm a college right now and I want to start an esports program, what are some of the things that I should be thinking about? What are the top of mind legal issues that I should be thinking about?
Sure. So you'll want to be considering, how your esports program intersects with your code of conduct. And that's going to be what we're really focusing on here today. We're going to be talking about issues such as Title IX, harassment and inclusion, cyberbullying and cyberstalking, and your mental health and physical health of your esport athletes. And I think Amy is going to start out the conversation touching on some intersections between Title IX and esports.
Great, Amy.
Thanks. So by just really quick introduction, Title IX, for those of you who don't already know, is a federal civil rights law that protects people from discrimination on the basis of their sex. Title IX applies broadly to educational programs and activities that receive federal financial assistance, which for my purposes as a higher ed lawyer and for purposes of our discussion today, essentially means that every aspect of academics, extracurriculars, and employment at U.S. colleges and universities fall under the umbrella of Title IX scope. So in other words, this would include our esports programs, whether they are housed within athletics, they are within our extracurriculars, or Darius, to your point, whether we have opportunities to earn credit as part of an esports curriculum. So at a really high level, Title IX prompts a couple of considerations under the broad umbrella of anti-discrimination. First, we're thinking about equal opportunity and equal access. And second, we're thinking about the prevention of and response to sex-based harassment. With respect to equal opportunity in particular, and again, speaking in the very broadest of strokes for today's purposes, Title IX requires equal opportunity in terms of access to our academics, our courses, our programs. Equal opportunities to participate in the full range of extracurricular activities that we offer, and equal opportunity to participate in athletics. So you'll note that I pretty carefully carved out extracurriculars from athletics here, and that's because Title IX has a robust scheme of mandates and expectations very specific to athletics. That detail around that assessment is outside of the scope, potentially outside of the interest of our viewers today. But what's sort of fun, at least if you're sort of into the wonky side of the law to think about, is that the dinner table debate of is competitive gaming a sport is actually a legal question. It's a legal question that has not been decided, although I think if we were to put on our prognosticators' hats, we would expect the courts to be dealing with these issues as esports sort of blow up in the collegiate space. So we know that Title IX applies to our esports programs because we have this broad mandate to provide equal opportunity regardless of an individual's sex. But what we don't know yet is whether or not this athletic scheme, when we think about removing or adding different teams to our programs, all of those things, we aren't quite certain yet whether or not Title IX applies that specifically, or that aspect of Title IX applies. So just to take a step back, really, whether or not esports count as intercollegiate athletics is an open question, but I would encourage all of you who are either thinking about launching an esports program or who already, have gotten into the esports game on campus, to sort of put aside that question of classification and really be thinking about equal opportunity in sort of the broadest sense and what that means in this really specific context. And just to talk a little stats and figures, we start with a pretty common understanding that women are estimated to make up about 45% of the gaming population in the US, but professional esports athletes, about 5% of them are women or identify as women. That's a pretty big disparity. And we're already seeing that disparity translated to the collegiate space, which is why I encourage us to be thinking about this equal opportunity aspect of things.
Right, absolutely. And I know you have, and Andrea as well, has a lot of experience ensuring that colleges and universities are compliant with Title IX for traditional sports programs. And really, esports is no different, right? I mean, it hasn't been, like you said, technically classified as a sport yet, but all the compliance that you need to go through is really the same as with traditional sports. So maybe just say a few quick words about some of the things that will ensure that a university is compliant with Title IX.
Absolutely. So I would think about the traditional categories of Title IX athletics compliance: scholarships, opportunities to participate, and benefits that are given to those participants. So the questions we might be asking ourselves are, to whom are we giving esports scholarships? So this is a big recruiting tool, right? We all know, we're all in the gaming space and we know how popular competitive gaming is. So it's a big draw for our colleges and universities in terms of recruitment. Scholarships going hand in hand with that. So thinking about what our scholarship slate looks like. Is there equity in our scholarships? From where are we recruiting? Both outside of our institutions, are we linked up with any pipelines? A lot of school districts in the K through 12 space have their own teams, but there are also a lot of, sort of special interest groups that cater to very particular demographics. Are we building relationships with those entities? And then on campus, where are we targeting our efforts to increase participation on campus? How broadly is our reach in terms of letting people know that we have this team, this club, this group, and inviting, in sort of encouraging an inclusive spirit? And there are also diversity metrics, right? Some tournaments already have diversity mandates, so expectations that teams will have sort of meet certain thresholds. But are we thinking about our own metrics the same way we quite frankly have to in the Title IX space when we think about our traditional athletics teams, football, basketball, et cetera? And before we move on, I do want to sort of make the PSA announcement that discrimination based on other protected classes and characteristics really of equal importance for us to be thinking about, and worthy of that extra consideration when we're thinking about building and sustaining these esports programs. And that really dovetails with the broader issue that I think Andrea sort of previewed for us early on, which is, how are we thinking about our plans and approach to combating and responding to the toxicity that unfortunately has become essentially inherent in some of these esports environments.
Yeah, and that's a nice segue into the next topic I wanted to talk about, which is cyberbullying and cyber stalking. Again, this is not something that was unique or is unique to esports. This has existed for as long as the internet has existed, and we've been advising colleges and universities on how to deal with these types of issues. But I think, with the advent of of Twitch and other more social platforms, I think we've definitely seen a little bit more cyber stalking and cyberbullying in the world of video games and esports. So, Andrea, maybe talk about that a little bit and what schools should be thinking about.
Sure. Yeah. As you mentioned, Darius, video gaming has a long history of cyberbullying and cyber stalking. I think everyone knows what cyberbullying is. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's bullying by way of electronic means. And the Department of Ed has come out with commentary on bullying, traditional bullying too. And we know that the impacts of cyberbullying are real. The victims report feelings of anxiety, depression, fear, anger, all those. Some examples of cyberbullying might be doxing, where one player threatens to publish or make public another player's private information, such as their actual name, address, telephone number. Griefing, which is just essentially intimidating or harassing another player in order to sabotage their play. It could even be trying to sabotage your own teammate. It is a very real issue and problem. So, of course, schools' codes of conduct should absolutely be addressing cyberbullying and cyberstalking. Some schools actually have a separate esports code of conduct that complements their general code of conduct. And, universities should be thinking about fostering a respectful environment for play, of course, prohibiting any threats of violence, intimidation, any illegal activity, prohibiting discrimination or harassment based on gender, sexual orientation, race, etc. I think those are and of course you want to prohibit cheating. Those are some of the, high level punch lists that of things schools want to be considering to combat cyberbullying and cyberstalking.
Yeah, you mentioned the code of conduct, which I don't know if a lot of people understand what that is, but it's basically the social contract between the university and the students. So in terms of thinking about esports and a university code of conduct, what are, a couple of key things that the code of conduct should address when it comes to college esports programs?
Yeah, so your code of conduct, if you decide to have a separate esports code of conduct, you want it to complement and dovetail with your general code of conduct. And as you said, it's a promise, an agreement by the esports players. So you want to address prohibit illegal activity, prohibit cheating, prohibit discrimination, encourage a respectful, enjoyable, pleasant environment for play. Touch on the Title IX issues that Amy mentioned. It's really broad-reaching.
And Amy, I wanted to ask you about mental health. What are, obviously, there are mental health issues in every profession, but we see some of that a little bit more in esports and gaming. What can colleges do to preemptively address mental health concerns?
Yeah, Darius, it's a really good and really important point. I think both because when we look at esports in particular, there have been a lot of high-profile examples of professional athletes having panic attacks or experiencing anxiety, which has been productive in terms of the conversation, some transparency into that. But we also know that esports or gaming in general, not necessarily only in the competitive space, is an area that has been sort of a target for different addictive behaviors. In fact, the World Health Organization just a couple of years ago, defined gaming disorder as one of its addictive behaviors. It's actually a diagnosable condition under their constructs. So it's really important because of the esports overlay. But this sits in the broader conversation that we should be having, and we are having, about what a lot of us view as an ongoing mental health crisis among college age adults. It's a pressure-filled time of our lives. So these things working in complement, unfortunately, require us to be thinking about how we can connect some dots on our campuses. So for our esports staff in particular, especially if your esports coaches, advisors, leadership aren't otherwise sort of hooked into your student affairs team, informing them about available resources on campus, available resources off campus, making sure that they're educated to share information. It seems like a simple thing to do, but it is that simple first step. It's arming people with information so that that can be passed on to what, quite frankly, may be a high-risk population, so to speak, in terms of some of these concerns. We might also be thinking about what education we can offer to both our athletes and our leadership teams to recognize in one another some of the signs of whether it's the addictive behaviors, or we've seen, unfortunately, on both the professional and collegiate spaces, maybe hand in hand with some of the addictive behaviors, but I'm not going to stop. It's that competitive drive. I'm going to leave practice and go back to my dorm room and sign in and play for another 8 hours. And so we think about lack of sleep, and sort of it starts to bleed from mental health into some of the physical aspects. And the last piece, because I can't stop myself as a lawyer, is I always want to be thinking about, are our employees or volunteers informed about the necessity to accommodate qualified disabilities? Have we as an institution thought about the accessibility piece? So it's a little bit different than recognizing disabilities, but is our gaming space accessible to all members of our community? It's just another place to connect some dots, making sure that we're providing education, people are aware of the policies and procedures, and quite frankly, the legal mandates that we all operate under.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to wrap up, Andrea, with talking about some physical wellness concerns. I mean, you have trainers for the college basketball team and people to take care of your athletes at a university. There are definitely physical concerns with esports, although it might not be the first thing you think about. What are some of those physical concerns, and how should colleges be looking at those?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Darius. As Amy touched on, this is competitive, serious play. These are athletes, and while they're not, traditional stick and ball athletes, there are physical injuries associated with esports gaming. The top 3 reported injuries are carpal tunnel, tennis elbow, back pain. You're sitting for quite a while. Other injuries are digital eye strain related to screen time and the exposure to bright flashing lights. Amy touched on this, but other kind of physical areas to be aware of if your esports athletes are inactive and you don't have a fitness component to your program, which universities actually should consider, is, the general ailments that come associated to inactivity, muscle loss, weight gain, stress and anxiety, and things of that nature. And then just to touch upon, there are reports of doping and drug abuse in the esports world, of players, for example, abusing prescription drugs that are typically prescribed for ADD and ADHD. So to your second question, Darius, there are absolutely things that schools can consider to combat and prevent physical injury in their esports athletes. Those would be, consider treating your esports athletes like you would a traditional athlete. Include a fitness component in your esports program. Provide access to athletic equipment. And as you mentioned, athletic trainers and medical personnel. I will add the caveat that, be aware of the jurisdiction that you're in. There was a recent Pennsylvania Supreme Court case, for example, that held that where a school, a college promises to make services available, such as medical personnel at, in this case, it was football practice, they have to make good on that promise and actually provide the services. Once they make that kind of affirmative promise, they do have to provide the services that are offered.
Yeah, thanks, Andrea. That's great stuff. Well, I've had a great time today, but that's about all the time we have. If anyone has any questions about any of the legal issues that we've raised on this podcast today, please drop them into the comments and we'll do our best to answer them without providing any actual legal advice, of course. Until next time, I'm Darius, this is Andrea and Amy, and we are Lawyers with Game. We'll see you next time.